Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl.
And today on the Online Great Books podcast, we're going to talk about Leo Tolstoy's little bitty novel, book, essay, short story, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. I didn't get the same one you got, Karl.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Look at this thing.
You got the penguin, I got the bantam.
It's a teeny little thing.
Yeah.
It's the smallest chunk of Tolstoy that could be had. Everything else is roughly 20 times this size, so this is what we did.
Right. So Russia has this tradition of novels. They had I guess maybe they still do. In the late 19th century, people like Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, there's a bunch of big, heavy hitters, and we haven't done any Russian novels. Well, the problem is, Russian novels are 1,000 pages long.
Yep.
Brothers Karamazov is one of my favorite books in the world, but it's a hard row to hoe. So we picked a short one, figuring it would be easy.
And it's not easy, and it's good. I'd like to read Anna Karenina and War and Peace and all those things that you're supposed to read. But, trying to put out a podcast every week, I just can't find a 7-day period in which I can finish those.
You couldn't do War and Peace in 7 days.
No.
It's 1,700 pages.
Right.
I've been reading it for 25 years. I'm still halfway through it.
Right. Coming in 2041.
No, it's really good. I just got distracted. I mean, it's a good novel. A woman at the gym, she used to be at the gym. She joined some club where you spend a year reading War and Peace. So she got all the way through it, and it's good. And of course, my daughter Sarah's gone through it because she loves huge novels, reads faster than I do, and she loves it, thinks it's fantastic. But we didn't want to do that, so we did the 100 pages of Death of Ivan Ilyich, thinking it'd be a barrel of laughs.
That's not what I thought.
It's not.
It is not.
No, the main character dies in the first page. Then we get flashbacks, and we learn about his life as we go through, but you already know he's dead. I don't know. I almost didn't like this book because nobody seems to be a good character.
Yeah, they're all
There were
awful.
2 people that were good characters, I thought. The son, maybe, and Gerasim, the peasant.
Now, see, that's interesting you say that, because I was reading this and I kept thinking, Karl is going to say, this is just the perfect little book. You say that every now and then. It's a perfect little book.
Did you think I would? Do you think it's a perfect little book, or you just thought that I would think that?
I thought that you might say that.
Well, the reason I wouldn't is just because I like books with good guys. I like books with, like the Mishima book is a perfect little book because it's perfectly done and it has people that you like.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the 2 characters' names, but the boy and the girl in that book, you read that book. What was that? The Sound of Waves?
The Sound of Waves, yeah, it's so good.
If you read that little book, you're going to love those two characters. I'm not a big fan of Ivan.
No. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Karl and I we've set a precedent, guys. We've done a little bit of planning. So I can share with you today that the show after this is going to be The Facts Concerning the Recent Carnival of Crime in Connecticut by Mark Twain. And then we're going to read the Dorothy Sayers translation of Song of Roland after that. And then the Christmas week show is going to be A Christmas Carol by Dickens.
We have to get into Dickens at some point.
Anyway, that's as much as a plan as we've ever had.
Usually we show up at the show and say, well, what are we going to read next week?
Yeah.
And then there's crickets. So we are on top of our game here.
Yeah, so read along.
Everything is planned out, just like Ivan had his life planned out.
Yeah, what a cautionary tale. What a cautionary tale. By the way, Jake from Seminar 43 is one that suggested in our podcast channel on OGB Slack that we read this little thing. So thank you, Jake, because it was not on my radar, but clearly it should have been. Ivan is a cosmopolitan, striving wiener.
He's a success.
Yeah.
He's a judge, I think.
Yeah.
By the end of his life, He's respected, apparently. He has a wife. He has 2 children, I think, that have survived to just before adulthood. He has a few others that died because it's the 19th century, and that's what happened. He's got a wife who at one point was good looking. He has a regular game of whist that he does.
Is it whist in your translation?
It's whist in my translation.
It actually says bridge in this one.
Well, they're cousins.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But you can't play 5-handed bridge, can you?
No, but he talked about the 5th having taking turns sitting out.
So maybe it is bridge.
I wonder if they got some weird party bridge thing they play where 5s and 6s. I don't know. Yeah, this guy has an idea about what his life should be like. He wants to have a certain kind of house. He wants to have a certain kind of neighborhood. He wants the neighbors to think a certain kind of thing about him. He wants to have a certain amount of respect. He wants to be a judge. He seems to like when the bailiff says, order, order, all rise, and introduces the judge. And he mentions that little vignette of, he wants this public esteem. We open the book, though. He's laying there dead. Then it goes back to talk a little bit about his life and what a POS he was. In the preface of the little thing here I got, Karl, it says, the Tolstoys were a well-known family of old Russian nobility who traced their ancestry to a mythical nobleman named Indrus, described by Peter Tolstoy as arriving from Nemec, from the lands of Caesar, to Chernigov in 1353, along with his 2 sons, Litvinos and Zamontin, I don't know, and a Druzina, I don't know what that is, of 3,000 people. How about that? They traced their lineage back to a mythical nobleman who brought, I guess, a tribe of 3,000 people to their area. That's awesome.
Yeah, I guess he was a count.
It says in 1844, he began studying law and Oriental languages at Kazan, Kazan, I don't know, University, where teachers described him as, quote, both unable and unwilling to learn, unquote. Yeah, I liked that part.
That sounds good.
And, he ends up being an anarchist, this guy, He says, the truth is that the state is a conspiracy designed not only to exploit, but above all to corrupt its citizens. Whew. And he was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1901, but he turned it down because he thought that the money would unnecessarily complicate his life.
Yeah, and he had a weird, I haven't delved too much into this. He had a unique brand of Christianity that he held to at the very end. He went on some spiritual journeys in his life. Interesting guy. War and Peace was early. That was 1869. Gosh. Can you imagine having written that when you were 40 years old?
Yeah, he was a genius.
I'm looking at the picture of him on Infogalactic. He almost has a Teutonic gaze. He's got an interesting physiognomy.
Are we going to read Schoenberg on physiognomy? Not Schoenberg. Schopenhauer.
Might be fun.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun.
If looking at me, what would you think?
Teuton Axman. Hardy. Honest to a fault.
Capable of great love and great violence.
Right at the beginning of chapter 2. He's already dead, guys. He's already dead. He's got a friend comes and visits the house and goes and looks at the body. They didn't embalm people at this point. So he's just laying there and it just stinks. It stinks in the room. You don't go to the funeral home. You lay there in the living room at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend shows up and to pay his respects, and he's in there stinking up the place. But it goes back to in chapter 2. He says the story of Ivan Ilyich's life was of the simplest, most ordinary, but therefore most terrible.
Yeah, I like the way Tolstoy sets it up. So you learn about this guy. I think the first chapter is kind of important for setting the stage because everybody's acting kind of like Ivan is going to act.
Yeah.
So his buddies Schwartz, who must be a German living in Russia, there were a few of those, and Pyotr come over. Schwartz just wants to arrange another card game. Pyotr is upset because he's got to sit and talk with the widow. In my translation, it's the close acquaintances, the so-called friends of Ivan Ilyich, involuntarily added to themselves that now they had to fulfill the tedious demands of propriety by attending the funeral service and paying the widow a condolence call. They don't really want to go there. They don't want to do it out of respect for him. They feel that they have to because it's what's expected in society is that when someone dies, you go to the funeral. Or Well, this would have been the wake and then the process, the pre-funeral service.
Yeah, everybody's so phony. It's just gross.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Pyotr's walking around and so this would be an Orthodox ceremony. But Pyotr obviously hasn't been to one because he never knows when to cross himself.
Yeah.
So the one thing he knew was that on such occasions it never did any harm to cross oneself. So if you go to a service like that, there's all sorts of bows and everything, and there's actually, you can do whatever you want, but there's kind of rules for it. He didn't know the rules. He's just going to throw him in. I thought that was funny. But he smells the body rotting. The kid is putting potpourri on the floor. Well, it turns out that Ivan did not die well. Ivan did not die well, but...
What does it mean, die well?
Well, he died screaming.
That's not
3 days of screaming. Maybe he died well. We'll see at the end of the novel. But Pyotr's thoughts on that, he's just happy it's not him. It's not raising any deep thoughts about mortality and life. In the end, he's just saying, well, at least it's not me.
Don't we all have a little bit of that at the funeral?
Didn't you go there and say, outlasted another one?
No, I don't think that I have it exactly like Pyotr did, but for the grace of God go I, is kind of that sentiment, right?
Well, yeah, but it's kind of a way to dodge the question. So there is the person that you knew, except it's not the person that you knew, if it's an open casket, and it ought to remind you that this very well could be you. It's
fixing to be.
Yeah, and the hymns they would have sung when he goes into the church service, if they do those, there's some funeral, I think there's 8 of them, there's funeral hymns that pretty much all just say, you're going to die. Everybody here, you're going to die. Where's all your golden riches now that you're in the tomb? And so it's very vivid and supposed to remind the people that go there. But Pyotr doesn't want to have any of that. There's another bit that I thought was interesting in chapter 1, the description of Ivan's face. As with all dead men, his face had acquired an expression of greater beauty, above all of greater significance than it had in life. Its expression implied that what needed to be done had been done and done properly. Moreover, there was in this expression a reproach or reminder to the living. This cat Ivan, whom I didn't like very much, in the casket, he's got an impressive and even a beautiful appearance.
He has more to teach dead than he did alive. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, 3 days of suffering, 3 days of screaming. A whole lot of days of suffering, 3 days of screaming. Ugh, it's hard to read. Well, is that it? I mean, you live your life and then you die in pain, and that's... when we get to chapter 2 and it says that his life, in my translation, is most horrifying, and yours most terrible. What's so horrifying about it?
He had no purpose. It was all for appearances. Other than whist or bridge, he didn't seem to have any genuine interest or passions. And he wasn't a craftsman. He didn't create anything. It was just a big nothing that he thought was everything.
Yeah, he wanted to live as was expected for him to live.
Yeah, he wanted to check all the boxes. He's the late 19th century version of a suburban striver. He wants to live in the right neighborhood, in the right house, and drive the right car, and have the corner office, and have people say, "Good morning, sir," to him when he comes to work. And he wants to be important, and he wants to go to the right meetings, and he wants to know the city councilor, all of that kind of stuff. So that what can happen? There's no so what can happen behind it. It's all for its own sake.
Yeah, I want to point something out I thought was pretty clever. So this is in chapter 2 in the Bantam translation. It's page 55. It's a little bit before the end of chapter 2. After he'd been working in the town for 2 years, Ivan Ilyich met his future wife. Praskovia Fyodorovna Mikel was the most attractive, intelligent, and outstanding young lady of the set in which Ivan Ilyich moved. So he starts flirting with her. I thought this line actually made me laugh. As an assistant on special commissions, Ivan Ilyich had, as a rule, danced. As an examining magistrate, he danced as an exception. So now that he's more important, right, he occasionally dances. So even his dancing follows the rules. So he occasionally danced with Praskovia Fyodorovna at the end of an evening, and it was mainly during the time they danced together that he conquered her. She fell in love with him. It does not say he fell in love with her. Ivan Ilyich had no clear and definite intention of marrying, but when the girl fell in love with him, he asked himself, really, why shouldn't I get married? So there's not even passion in his love. It's like he wasn't moved by anything. It was just, I guess this is what people do.
Yeah. Ugh.
I was listening to a discussion of, on a podcast of people who had done bad things in their lives and complaining, he doesn't even do it with any joy.
Yeah, this is a joyless individual. Yeah. From the first months of his wife's pregnancy, something new, unpleasant, depressing, and unseemly. It's just a paragraph after where you were there, Karl. And from which there was no way of escape, unexpectedly showed itself. His wife, without any reason, began to disturb the pleasure and propriety of their life. The negative sentiment has crept into the marriage. She began to be jealous without any cause, expected him to devote his whole attention to her, found fault with everything, and made coarse and ill-mannered scenes. You ever know a couple and you've seen it go sour? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a friend that calls it negative sentiment. She says, as long as everybody has positive sentiment, as long as you think everybody's trying and everybody cares, the marriage will be okay. But if one of the partners gets it in their head that somebody's doesn't have goodwill or they're not trying, nothing will be right from there on. And that negative sentiment is just that mental framing of the relationship. You can't really change it. You can't, if you get negative sentiment about someone, there's almost nothing I can do to help you switch that.
Well, and in this case, there's no guard against negative sentiment because he doesn't have any goals beyond independence and propriety.
Yeah.
So it's not as if he married her out of passion or a Schopenhauerian demands of nature itself that he marry her and produce children. It doesn't seem to care much about the children.
No.
So there's no grand purpose for the marriage at all. If the marriage has a purpose, then you can get over the socks on the floor.
For him, the purpose is just to make him look more solid. I can imagine in Russia in the late 19th century, perennial bachelors might not ascend as high in the civil service as a guy that was married with a few kids,
Yeah. You might be suspect or not stable.
Yeah.
It says a few paragraphs later, so he wants independence. She is cramping his style. His work was one thing that made any impression on Praskovia Fyodorovna. That's the one thing she respects. And so he began to use his work and the obligations it entailed as a way of combating his wife and safeguarding his independence. So a few paragraphs lower than that, to the degree that his wife became more irritable and demanding, Ivan Ilyich increasingly made work the center of gravity of his life.
Yeah. I've seen that too. Have they already had it? Yeah, at this point in the book, they've already had a child die. Infant mortality used to be pretty high. My mom has 3 siblings that lived. There were 2 that didn't. That was just in the 30s and 40s, 1930s and 40s. We're not talking 1830s and 40s. That stuff really starts to change with antibiotics in the mid-40s or in to 50s. Yeah.
It used to be the usual. I listened to all 40 hours of the audiobook of Montaigne's essays. Took me a while. He kind of jokes about it. He had 1 child that survived. He had 6, I think, that died. All my children seem destined to die as infants.
There's a lore out there now. Maybe it's not even a lore. They say, you can go look it up. I don't know. 80% of marriages don't survive the death of a child, or something like that. You'll see stats about how they just don't make it past that. Gosh. What does that mean? What does that mean for these people? What does that mean for new people?
It tears me up. When we go travel, I think the last time we did it was probably in Tennessee, East Tennessee. Smoky Mountain National Park. There's all these old churches in there and old graveyards. And so you walk around the graveyard and just to see, and there's be a bunch of gravestones with the same name. just to see who the people were in this church, see if anybody has the same name as you. There's no shoots anywhere. We're kind of rare in this country.
Phew.
But then there's the little gravestone for unnamed, or the date, when the date is 1843 to 1843.
Yep. Whole bunch of that. More children came. His wife became more and more querulous and ill-tempered. But the attitude Ivan Ilyich had adopted towards his home life rendered him almost impervious to her grumbling. So she keeps squeezing these kids out and putting them in the ground. And he keeps going to work. Ugh.
Yeah, so their relation between each other is one of spite. This is not happy. He's already made a bungle of things.
How do they keep getting those babies in there? If they hate each other and they keep dying, that's amazing. Biology's a hell of a drug, isn't it?
You can't say when a man and woman love each other very much. Not in this case.
It's like when two very boring, hateful people are in close proximity and the winter's long. There you go.
Well, in St. Petersburg, I don't know, is that where this is set? Wherever they are. It's like 20 hours of darkness.
Or a lifetime of it. But after 7 years' service in that town, he was transferred to another province as public prosecutor. They moved but were short of money, and his wife did not like the place they moved to. Though the salary was higher, the cost of living was greater. Besides, the whole of Ivan Ilych's life continued to flow as he considered it should do, pleasantly and properly. So things continued for another 7 years. His eldest daughter was already 16, another child had died, and only one son was left, a schoolboy, and a subject of dissension. Ivan Ilyich wanted to put him in the school of law, but to spite him, Praskovia Fedorovna entered him at the high school. The daughter had been educated at home and had turned out well. The boy did not learn badly either. Just the years are just reeling away, and there's nothing. And it's Tolstoy. He's writing. He's making this story up. He can write anything he wants, but there's nothing to write about this guy except him getting a promotion and burying another kid. That's pretty much it.
Note that kids haven't been named. I think they're barely named by the end of the novel. I think the boy is. Look at the alienation that you get from the writing. He's alienated from his family. We don't even get the names of his children.
Yeah.
Which, if you were writing a biography of somebody and you were already well into their middle age, wouldn't you have named who the kids?
The son, Hunter Biden, blah, 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 blah. Of course. Of course you would. But what's this guy's life about? Like, you're right. He's writing the story of this guy's life. What's his life about? What's the narrative? What is the story you tell about it? And the kids' names aren't even material to this guy's life, apparently. They don't even matter.
Right.
Ugh. It's so gross. He finally gets a promotion after 17 years of just working as an assistant DA and that kind of stuff. And then later a prosecutor in the provinces. He gets a promotion. And they move, and he says, in reality, and he's very happy with this house. He moves, he gets a new job, and he goes and moves ahead of the family and oversees some renovations and then furnishes the house, and he's very, very proud of it. But the writer says, in reality, it was just what is usually seen in the houses of people of moderate means who want to appear rich, and therefore succeed only in resembling others like themselves. There are damasks, dark wood, plants, rugs, and dull and polished bronzes, all the things people of a certain class have in order to resemble other people of that class. His house was so like the others that it would never have been noticed, but to him all seemed to be quite exceptional. He was very happy when he met his family at the station and brought them to the newly furnished house, all lit up, where a footman in a white tie opened the door to the hall, decorated with plants, and when they went on into the drawing room and the study, uttering exclamations of their delight. He's got a McMansion, Karl.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about, did you ever see the movie Clueless?
Yeah. Love that movie.
It's a Jane Austen movie.
It's Emma?
Yeah, which we could read sometime. Might be my favorite Jane Austen novel. But she comes up to her house, and it's like this tacky house with like lots of mirrors and columns and stuff. It has the stuff that, like when I was a kid, we had, what was the name of the company? Magic Mirrors or something? They would put these commercials on. You could make your house look bigger with mirrors. Right. If you like that stuff, that's fine. But this is going to sound snobbish. It's not me. I've known some well-off people of taste. And you go to the house, and it doesn't look like that.
No.
It may have very nice stuff in it, but it's stuff that has a purpose.
Yeah.
Not let me buy this thing to show you how much taste I have.
Yeah, because nobody wants that shit now. Right? That the stuff that the folks that actually have some money and have had it for a while, so that the ability to do those things isn't novel or fun anymore. They start looking for the quality and the form that follows the function and a whole different level of sort of furnishing.
Oh, and the house will be more comfortable.
Yeah.
Somebody I know, I remember we went to her house. We visited her house. She didn't want you to step on the carpet because she had vacuumed it and made the rows correct.
Right. Did she have a shag rake?
I don't know, but she was very particular about the way everything looked, and if you stepped on it, you messed up the pattern. And then I know somebody else. I never knew exactly how well off he was. I think he was pretty darn well off. It was a nice house on the north side of Chicago, and it's just, I mean, everything in there is top notch, but it's comfortable. It's a home. Yeah. He has this stuff because he likes it and takes joy in it.
Right.
And I much prefer his house to the carpet lady's house. And so I think that's what I'm thinking of Ivan. He wants it to look perfect because he thinks it ought to look perfect.
He doesn't realize the house is for him. He thinks everything in his life is for someone else to observe and judge.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And
I hate that about people.
Well, and the other thing, the house kills him. So he's hanging draperies. He's very excited. He's trying to make everything right. He was so preoccupied with these matters that he often did some of the work himself, rearranged the furniture, rehung the draperies. Once, when he mounted a stepladder to show a perplexed upholsterer how he wanted the draperies hung, he missed a step and fell. But being a strong and agile man, he held on to the ladder and merely banged his side against the knob of the window frame. The bruise hurt for a while, but the pain soon disappeared. That's the beginning. That's the thing that kills him.
What do you think killed him? Well, we'll keep going. That's part of the fun of this. If there's any fun in this book, is trying to figure out what the heck killed the guy.
Well, I was thinking, I don't know, feels like cancer to me, but...
Yeah, it seems like cancer.
The occasion of it is him banging his side on a doorknob.
Yeah.
Which must have hurt like hell.
Yeah, he banged his tumor on a doorknob. Who knows? After dinner, if they had no visitors, Ivan Ilyich sometimes read a book that was being much discussed at the time, and in the evening settled down to work, that is, read official papers, compared the depositions of witnesses, and noted paragraphs of the code applying to them. This was neither dull nor amusing. It was dull when he might have been playing bridge, but if no bridge was available, it was at any rate better than doing nothing or sitting with his wife.
Better than sitting with his wife. Note he's not reading books that he thinks are good.
Right. Ones that are just the New York Times list.
Ones that are talked about.
Yeah, he's reading Malcolm Gladwell. So I bought a book the other day, Karl. I'm glad this gentleman wrote it. It's written by Josh Crutchmer, and I'm sorry, Josh Crutchmer. It's called Red Dirt. Roots music, born in Oklahoma, raised in Texas, at home anywhere. So it's about country music in Oklahoma from, 79 to 2019. I mean, how many books are there about that? This one. So I'm like, I got to get this book. It's terrible.
Is it even good as a reference?
Yes, it is. This guy was here for a lot of the stories. He knows a lot of the people, but the subjects of the stories get lost. It's just a mess. He needed an editor. Books are tricky, man. Almost every time I buy a new book, I get smoked because it's just not any good. You know, it's good to have this one on the shelf, like you say. As a reference, it's good to have this, but it's just not. I wanted to read the whole thing. Can't do it. It's no good.
Does it ramble?
Yeah.
When you write your book, dear listener, it might be a good practice to then chop out half of it.
Yeah. Have somebody that doesn't care about you edit it.
You have to be able to get rid of the things. I mean, you think, well, I really like that turn of phrase. Yeah, but it doesn't fit here. Take it out. Just be brutal. Cut it up. When I used to do academic writing, I'd write something that was too long for the submission, and then I would just cut things out of it, see if I could say it faster.
It's like these podcasts. We just record too much and give it to Brett, and hopefully it comes out okay. We recorded, Trent and I recorded over 2 hours on Bluegrass today for the Music and Ideas show. That'll come out at an hour 20 probably, would be my guess.
Just excise me.
Yeah. No. But this book is super tight. This is not that. But he's reading what he thinks he should be reading, right? He doesn't want to be left out at the water cooler talk, So he's not reading them for his own purposes again. Nothing in his life is for his own purpose.
Let me put this in modern terms, dear listener. You don't watch Netflix because you want to watch the stuff on Netflix. You watch Netflix because everybody at work is talking about the show Ozark, or I don't even know what's on that because I cancel my Netflix. But they're watching it so that they can talk to everybody else about it.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the way you're supposed to do it.
Hope not. We've only got 70 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Better figure out what you need to do for you, not read off the top list.
There's a line here about his job that I didn't like. I mean, I liked it as writing, but I didn't like it. You might already quote it. On the whole, Ivan Ilyich, life moved as long as he believed his life should, easily, pleasantly, and properly. He got up at 9, had his coffee, read the newspapers, and put on his uniform and went to court. There, the harness in which he worked had already been worn into shape, and he slipped right into it. Like a horse.
Yeah.
Like a carriage horse, I think, is what the simile is here. And you're just going to ride around in a circle through the town all day. You're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Because you're not going anywhere.
Do you want to be a carriage horse or do you want to be a plow horse? Because I read harness and I'm not thinking of handsome cabs or whatever. I was thinking, work.
The plow horse is actually producing something.
Seems like.
He's giving opinions on legal matters. It doesn't seem like he actually cares much about that. It's not from a passion for justice that he's doing this.
Can you imagine living in a country where the people in the Justice Department were just a bunch of bureaucrats and functionaries? Can you imagine what that would be like?
Gosh, I think that would probably be terrible.
Golly. Good thing we don't live in Russia. Gosh. You know what's awesome about plow horses?
What is awesome about plow horses?
Their exhaust fertilizes the field instead of poisons it. And among other things.
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that? You plant something, and then you feed it to the animal, and then it plows the field with what you planted last year, and then the exhaust goes on the feed for next year. It's perfect.
The excrement, you mean?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Sounds like a perpetual motion machine.
Yeah, it might be if you're careful.
Well, he's starting to get sick now, and nobody cares.
He doesn't even really know if he's sick in the beginning. He has a queer taste in his mouth and felt some discomfort in his left side. And that discomfort would increase and then wane. And he'd be irritable, then he'd kind of be okay. So the depiction of an illness coming on, his perception of it, I think is really good. Well, that's not true. I was going to say I haven't had a life-threatening illness, but that's not true. I had an acute appendicitis attack and an emergency appendectomy when I was, I don't know, how old was I? 16? Wouldn't have been very much earlier. I don't know, 70 years, 100 years earlier. That would have got me,
But it would have been quick.
It would have been quick-ish. The thing bursts, you get sepsis, and you die. Maybe it takes you a day or two. So he had, months or maybe even a couple of years of this. It's not clear to me how long it takes. But I didn't feel well for a week or two. Just didn't feel good, queasy. Sometimes I'd hurt, and then maybe not. And it would ramp up. You're like, what the heck is going on? And then it starts really kicking you, doubling you over, barfing. But at no point did I think I was going to die. And, I wondered how Tolstoy, I always wonder about this about any author, they write, at least, I don't know if this is what it's like to experience a life-threatening illness and then ultimately die of it, but Tolstoy writes a very convincing account of what that might be for someone like Ivan Ilyich. That to me that's the amazing thing about writers. When they can write something that seems rational and is convincing and is somewhat surprising sometimes about things that they have not experienced.
Yeah, it's a work of imagination I've mentioned this before. I've been oppressed by time and history for the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about my grandparents, and gosh, I'm not sure what one of them died of. Might have been cirrhosis. But two of them. So one was probably lung cancer, and one was a bunch of strokes. He was 88, so you die of being 88. But, there you are, you're going along, and you start having a little cough, think nothing of it, it's just a cold, and then it sticks around, and it doesn't get better. In those days, you wouldn't have doctors to do a scan, and I don't know that Grandma had a scan in 1980.
Right.
You're just getting sicker and sicker, and is this the one that gets me?
Right.
And the slow realization that Ivan has that this, in fact, is the one that's going to get him is terrifying. There was a thread in our Slack channel, which you get to join when you become a member at Online Great Books. So go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and sign up. They were talking about scariest books. And I said 1984 was the scariest book ever. But this book's pretty scary.
Yep. Not
a horror novel or anything. There's no surprises or shocks, but the slow degradation of Ivan, pretty gross.
He has to experience his mortality. He's got to realize that he's dying before he starts actually putting value on himself. When he gets really sick, he starts actually paying attention to how other people act, and he finds that there's only like one friend around him. And I don't think he would have even been able to have that one friend if he hadn't been sick. His sort of valet, servant, peasant boy ends up being the only person that's authentic and kind and patient with him when he's ill.
Mm-hmm. For his wife, it's Praskovia Fyodorovna's attitude toward her husband's illness was that he himself was to blame for it, and that the whole thing was simply another way of making her life unpleasant. So she frames the whole thing in how it affects her. And if only you'd take your medicine, Ivan. If only you'd be a good patient. You'd get better and quit torturing me.
She keeps acting like if he'll follow the right diet, take those medicines, go see the right specialist, that he's going to get better. And none of the doctors know anything. They've all got all these contradictory opinions. He goes to, I think, at least 3 that I counted. And they've all got different ideas about what it's going to be. And he kind of knows the whole time that nothing's going to get better.
And none of them tell him that.
And he asks them point blank, how bad is it? What are my chances of getting better? And none of them will answer him. I was reading that. I was like, yeah, nothing's changed. If you're going to die, like medicine can solve a few things that it couldn't solve then. But once you're out of the realm of the things that they can help you with, it's no different than it was for him.
Should they tell you?
Well, I was going to ask you that. I mean, I think so. I can't think of any times when being truthful is the wrong thing to do. I would entertain the idea that being truthful might not be the right thing to do sometimes. 4-year-old has got a week to live. Is it best to tell him you got 7 days, make it count? I don't know. But my default will always be to tell what I think is the truth. Now, one of the problems that the doctors have is they don't know what the truth is at that point.
Well, here's another problem the doctors have. If there's no treatment, there's no money.
Right.
So there's always going to be another treatment. Come in and let me see you and give you the next medicine. And I think Kant got something right. I think he got it the wrong way.
Flag the tape.
That book with the categorical imperative in it.
Yeah.
I forget his title. It's Metaphysics of Morals or something like that. But I think he gets it by magic. But the formulation that you always treat another human being as an end in himself and not as a means, I think that's a pretty good formulation.
Yeah.
If you see that a person is going to die and you hold that information from him, that means you're treating him as a means to some other end. You're not respecting him as a seat of action. I think that's bad. I mean, you're not going to tell your plow horse that at the end of the day you're going to shoot him, but he's a plow horse.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a right to know that because he doesn't know anything. But a human being, if there's an expiration date, which there is for every one of them, I think you need to tell it. You need to tell that person.
Yeah.
And I think also, so there's a thing in we used to have this thing in Western culture where it's memento mori. You might have seen pictures of paintings of saints with a skull on their desk. I remember I stayed in a monastery for a month in Germany when I was studying for my dissertation. And the archives for Edith Stein was in this monastery in Würzburg, Germany. So I got to stay there for a month. It was pretty good. And Father Michael, who has since departed, he was the prior, I guess. They're Carmelites. I don't know if they have abbots. He was down to like 30% heart function at the time that I met him. And he took me on a tour around the town and showed me everything. And at the end of the tour, he's a very cheerful, happy guy. At the end of the tour, he took me down to the crypt. And he's showing all of the graves of everybody else that's in the monastery. And then he points and says, "That's mine." And you might think that's a little gruesome.
No.
But it's not. I don't know that much about him. Michael Linson was his name. He's since died. He had charge of the archive there for a while. He was happy and cheerful. He was doing the things that he thought were good to do. And so this is the test. Pyotr, in the beginning of the book, doesn't do it right. He should have used this as a warning and say, hey, I'm going to die too.
Right.
And then once you know that and you really think about that, it's not a gruesome thought. We know every single human being that's ever lived. If you're biblical, there might be an exception or two, but every single person that's ever lived has died. Okay, so it's going to be me too.
Yeah.
And then you think, is the life I'm living the life that I would live if I knew that I had an expiration date? And the answer should be yes. If you would change something because you realize that you're going to die at some point in the future, then maybe you ought to change it.
My friend Dallas says you should keep your ticket punched.
Yeah, and it might even be the fear of death that makes us do a lot of the wrong things that we do. Say you're, I don't know, some kind of shady business deals or something. You're trying to build up your money to protect yourself against catastrophes in life, right? But you can't do that.
Yeah. I'm interested in, we see these life expectancy tables, and it used to be that the life expectancy was just going up. I remember being a little kid and like every day, every year on the news, on the radio at some point, they'd be like, well, life expectancy for children born this year should be, it was going up, It's really not going up anymore. But I don't think it ever really was going up. It's just infant mortality was going down as people started wearing seatbelts. And so on average, they weren't dying as young. But like once you got past the car wreck and the appendicitis age,
and Omaha Beach
and childbirth, for ladies. So, kind of once you get to 30, it looks pretty much the same, I think, for people, has looked pretty much the same for people over the last, I don't know, probably 100 years, actually. If you could make it to 30, you're probably going to get to 76, no matter if you were born in 1910 or 2010, I think. But people walk around acting like, I know people my age are like, oh, well, by time, we get older, then this is going to happen. We'll live to 100. Well, I don't think so. Furthermore, hope not. But I don't think so. I don't think that's true.
It can be a delusion that causes you not to do the thing that Ivan should have done, which is find the things that bring him joy or bring joy to other people that he loves and do those things.
Yeah, but he didn't love anybody, including him.
Well, that's a problem too.
Yeah, he's a loveless individual. Benjamin Franklin was an old man, for then or for now. Old people have kind of always been 82, 83.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just not changed much. Kind of get tired of that. She began to wish he would die, yet she did not want him to die because then his salary would cease.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who, I won't name him. He's in his mid-60s. He had a brother-in-law who was 80. And he's dying. He had a do not resuscitate order and all that kind of stuff, and no feeding tube, blah, blah, blah. Hospice, put him in hospice care, and he lived without any food on this kind of DNR 16 days. An extraordinarily long time for a man that was in his situation. I don't remember what all the situation was, but when they put you in hospice, you're not supposed to be lasting much longer, especially if you have no food. And then later there was no fluids of any kind, and it went on for a long, long time, longer than anybody expected. And then unfortunately everybody at some point is like, gosh, it'd be best if this poor gentleman would die. Ugh.
Best for whom?
Probably, maybe everybody. I don't know.
Let's flip the question. Not, is it good for him to die? Is it good for him to live?
That's tough, If life is categorically good, then possessing that is good, and so long as you possess it.
See, I don't think we think much about that. I don't think we think much about what the point of life is. Our friend John Pasquarello will say this all the time, that the point of life is not avoiding death.
Yeah.
The point of life is a good life, and he's an Aristotelian, so it's, ultimately contemplation of the good. I think that's a good guess. Is life worth living? What is life for? These are the important questions. And then death is just, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the expected completion of everybody's turn at life.
Yeah, and it's expected. It's eventual.
Montaigne's whole concern was almost too much. He wrote about it all the time, was a good death.
Yeah.
Being the same person you are living as you're dying.
We've been recording for 72 hours so far today. And my family's tired of me. But this is a short book, or not book, it's an essay or something, I don't know, a short story.
Novella.
And I read this while I lay in bed with a very bad flu. Shivering, burning up, then freezing, weak as a kitten, had trouble holding the book. And I was reading about this guy laying in bed dying. It was terrible. It was very interesting, Tolstoy writing about how other people were treating him as a sick person. We all have occasion to be around people who are sick and aren't going to make it. And I hope that reading it will make me more artful with being in that position.
Yeah, and all he wants is kindness and somebody to tell him the truth, which only Gerasim is going to do. That's the peasant servant. Yeah,
the only unsophisticated, quote unquote, unsophisticated person in his life is the only one that will give him any touch, physical touch, or honesty.
This is probably some of Tolstoy's late life religion coming through. So this, for me, is page 104. It's the end of chapter 7. Gerasim was the only one who did not lie. Everything he did showed that he alone understood what was happening, saw no need to conceal it, and simply pitied his feeble, wasted master. Once, as Ivan Ilyich was sending him away, he came right out and said, "We all have to die someday, so why shouldn't I help you?" By this he meant that he did not find his work a burden, because he was doing it for a dying man, and he hoped that someone would do the same for him when his time came.
Yep.
So what's different about Gerasim than Pyotr and Schwartz and Fyodor and the other Russian names that you can't remember? All of his striver friends who can't figure out how to fit death into their framework.
Yeah.
Except, oh, the position is open.
Right.
I might get a promotion now that Ivan's gone.
On the last line of that chapter, the falsity around him and within him did him more than anything else to poison his last days.
I think Gerasim is probably the good guy in this book, if there is any.
Yes, definitely.
The one that you're supposed to be like. And him being a peasant, he's probably closer to the natural world. His life is simpler. It's not really romanticized at all. He's not a heroic figure. He's just a guy doing his work. This is what you do. This is what he probably did for his parents or grandparents, and he's hoping somebody to do it for him, which was a line that hit me. I sing our funerals. It's not often that they're people that I knew that I was really friendly with, because they're a couple generations above me. Well, maybe one generation. Yikes. I'm old.
Yeah.
And so we bring him into church and we sing him out, and you hope somebody do it for you someday. It's up for grabs. It might not be that way. You know, things are falling apart. It might be there's no church and no beautiful funeral service for me. But I hope there is. It means somebody will have to do it.
Yep.
And so I do it for Cy, and I do it for Sylvia, and I do it for, all these people, because they did it for the people before them, and it's the thing you do for people.
Yeah.
It's a duty.
Karl's big on filial piety.
Yeah, I guess I am. On page 93 of my book, right at the beginning of chapter 6, I thought this was dynamite stuff. Speaking of logic. So he had learned logic as a boy.
Oh.
The syllogism he had learned from Kiesewetters' logic, Caius is a man, men are mortal, therefore Caius is mortal, had always seemed to him correct as applied to Caius, but by no means to himself. That man Caius represented man in the abstract, and so the reasoning was perfectly sound. But he was not Caius, not an abstract man. He had always been a creature quite distinct from all the others. He had been little Vanya with a mama and a papa, with Mitya and Volodya, with toys, a coachman and a nurse, and later with Katenka, Vanya with all the joys, sorrows, and enthusiasms of his childhood, boyhood, and youth. Had Caius, the abstract Caius, ever known the smell of that little striped leather ball Vanya had loved so much? Had Caius ever kissed his mother hand so dearly, and had the silk folds of her dress ever rustled so for him? Had Caius ever rioted at school when the pastries were bad? Had he ever been so much in love, or presided so well over a court session? Caius really was mortal, and it was only right that he should die. But for him, Vanya, Ivan Ilyich, with all his thoughts and feelings, it was something else again. And it simply was not possible that he should have to die. That would be too terrible. I could go on, but that's just a marvelous passage. That the danger of abstractness. And so we think, yes, humans die, but not me.
Yeah, that's why it's good when they do to probably leave them in the living room for a few days. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Make them stink. Bring it home. Yeah, we're a little bit probably too far removed from it.
Yeah, for me, that's eventually we're going to have to read a Walker Percy novel.
Yeah.
For me, that's very reminiscent of Walker Percy. That's one of the big problems that his characters have. If we ever read Love in the Ruins, the guy invents an ontological lapsometer. And he's able to tell if you have drifted into angelism or bestialism. And angelism is when you're too abstract. Bestialism is when you forget that you are a person of intellect. You want to be right in the middle. And so Ivan he had a bad case of angelism. Things happen, but not to me.
Yeah.
Marriage is something one does. Children are things that one has.
So gruesome. When he's at death's door, though, it's when he finally realizes that he has made other people wretched. And he asks for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It took a whole life and months of suffering and 3 days of screaming to get him to that.
Yeah, there's a bit of a redemption at the end. But he has to realize that in the first chapter, one of his friends is joking, now that he's dead, Ivan really bungled things up. And it turns out it's absolutely true. He had bungled everything his whole life. And so his long illness, I don't know, could you think of his illness as a gift? So I want to read a little bit. So for me, this is 118. This is in chapter 9. He's starting to argue with God, to wonder why all the suffering's happening. And he hears this voice. Or at least, maybe it's his own thinking. So he's yelling at God. And then he gets the voice of his soul. What do you want? Was the first thought sufficiently intelligible to be expressed in words? What do you want? What do you want? He repeated inwardly. What? Not to suffer, to live. And once again he listened with such rapt attention that even the pain did not distract him. To live how? Asked the voice of his soul. Why? To live as I did before, happily and pleasantly. As you lived before, happily and pleasantly, said the voice.
Question mark.
Yeah. And in his imagination he called to mind the best moments of his pleasant life. Yet strangely enough, all the best moments of his pleasant life now seemed entirely different than they had in the past. All except the earliest memories of childhood. Way back in his childhood, there had been something really pleasant, something he could live with were it ever to recur. But the person who had experienced that happiness no longer existed. It was as though he were recalling the memories of another man. So he had had some joys. He'd mentioned them earlier, that his mother, his friends when he was a little boy, the smell of the ball that he played with. He'd had things that brought honest joy to his life, but he'd moved away from them. And this was a haunting line for me. It's on 120. It's like 4 paragraphs from the end of chapter 9. It's as though I had been going steadily downhill while I imagined I was going up. That's exactly what happened. In public opinion, I was moving uphill, but to the same extent, life was slipping away from me. And now it's gone, and all I can do is die. He figures out that he's done everything wrong.
Yeah. Later on he says, how can that be when I did everything properly?
Right. He did everything that was expected of him, and yet it was all wrong. None of it was genuine.
Everybody knows that it's all wrong, and they do it anyway.
Well, how could he do it differently? What could he have done differently?
This will say flippant. Virtually everything. Have a purpose. Have a care.
Should he have married Praskovia? What's her name?
I don't know. Maybe. But for a different reason. Enjoyed dancing with her. Danced with her more. Worked on it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Talk to his children. Stop seeing his life as a performance piece. Yeah.
So what's doing it properly? Well, you go to school and you get good grades. And if you're a boy, you go and you get to Eagle Scout, and then you do some volunteer work, and you fill out the applications, and you complete the essay, and you go to the other good school, and then you make good grades, and then you get a job and you fight to keep it. There's a pipe that we put people in still, and they do it all. So many people do all the things properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're 29, and you're $250,000 in debt, and you're systems analyst level 2.
David Gilmour says living lives of quiet desperation is the English way.
Yeah. And you're trying to get that systems analyst 3 position. Because if you do that, maybe you can buy a jet ski.
And the kids are off at school, and so you see them maybe half an hour at night, and you don't really know them. I think it's a very suggestive book. I think there are things that are joyful in life. Of course there are.
And they're all in the big city where the opportunity is, right?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Oh. Well, opportunity, Karl.
Yeah. Opportunity for what?
Get your ass used.
To keep moving.
Right.
To keep moving so you don't realize. Waylon Jennings tells me that things are rough where corn don't grow. I don't suppose it matters. I mean, you could live in a city as well as you could live in the country, but if you think you need to live in the city for opportunity for what? What are you aiming at? It's always the big question. This is why Aristotle starts with it in the beginning of the Ethics. So one of the OGB members is also at the gym. He'll know who he is. And I've been really enjoying, he's reading Aristotle's Ethics, and he just comes in and he's like, so Karl, I read that first chapter of the Ethics and it's just blowing my mind. I mean, of course you need to figure out what the purpose of everything is. So Aristotle starts, we have to figure out what the good for man is. What is the good life? And he's got an answer, and you can read it yourself or join us and read it in the seminar. And maybe you don't like his answer very much, but I think it's a pretty good answer. Yeah. I think the answer is something like what Aristotle came up with. But if you don't have an answer, what are you doing? Aristotle says, if you don't know where the target is, are you going to hit it with your arrow? No.
You just end up being a consumer. You consume a little of this, and consume a little of that, and a little of this, and you're just adrift. You just keep searching. Not getting nothing.
Well, you're helping somebody else achieve an end.
Yeah.
You're not an end in yourself, which is what Ivan needed to be, I think. You know, what kind of life do you want, Ivan? And are your choices, do your choices suck? If you're Ivan's friend, you could talk to him, say, really, this is it? Don't you love that girl? Don't you like kids? Maybe you don't. Maybe you shouldn't marry her. Or maybe you should get slapped in the face and realize there's good things in life. And then when you get to the end, and the end will come, I hate to say it, but the end will come, there won't be regrets. You asked earlier in the podcast about, what a good death is. I don't know, maybe dying in service of something you believe in, that's probably a good death. I think being surrounded by family is a good death.
When the Anthony Hopkins character in Legends of the Fall dies fighting that bear?
I haven't seen Legends of the Fall.
Well, that's a good
one. You spoiled it for me.
That's a good one. I've got a friend that said he always wanted to die because his gun hung in the holster. Sounds pretty good, too.
But, I don't know, having completed day 4008 of your middle management job successfully.
Well,
what was the point of getting your middle management job? We can save this, Your middle management job could be glorious if there's a for the sake of at the end of it.
Sure. Yeah, and if that's what you do to buy diapers so your kids do well, or whatever, that's all right. It's a means.
Or maybe, unlike Ivan, you actually do have a passion for the law, and you like the law code, and you enjoy doing this sort of thing, and maybe you want to actually bring justice.
Yeah.
Then it could be good. But if it's just a placeholder, well, what's it a placeholder for? What's the point beyond the point?
Seeking meaning in career is pretty tough, Karl.
Yeah, well,
I think that's a bit of propaganda that we've all been told.
I think we share a lot of opinions. There's a whole lot of prosperity out there right now, at least material prosperity. I don't know that there's a whole lot of happiness.
No, I think happiness is at an ebb here in 2020.
And there's signs for that. You can look. There are probably leading indicators of unhappiness that you could look up.
Yeah.
Drug use, suicide, all sorts of things that seem to be at historic peaks. You guys could read Death of Ivan Ilyich. I wouldn't call it fun. I'd say it's pretty good.
Have you ever read Fight Club?
I read half of it. I watched the movie, though.
He's dealing with some of the same problems, that being so stupid. The problems of modern life and consumerism and so on. Some of the same problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's better, and it's shorter. Go do that. I'm sorry that I'm not so much help on this one. I read that one while I was delirious, and I'm fading.
No, that's all right. We could read Fight Club at some point, too.
Yeah, we ought to.
Yeah, so I get to the end, and my notes, the ending, obviously, he dies. You knew that was going to happen because he died at the beginning. And I was wondering, is there any redemption? What's the point of the book? And I kind of answered myself that one ought to live the real thing. Because in the end, he's saying, was my life actually a real thing? And he doesn't think so. And then, so that leads to the question, who in the story has the real thing? Well, from the characters we get a good look at, I think it might just be Garrison.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that Schwartz character is just laughing at the abyss. He's no good.
Yeah.
He just wants another card game. That's an answer too, but I don't think it's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know what the wife wants.
Money.
The daughter wants to get married, go to dances, and wear pretty clothes. It's gross. But at the end, he learns to let the pain be. Like right at the very, very end. I like that.
Mm-hmm. He sort of abstracts himself from it.
Yeah, he got some distance from it. I like that.
Yeah. Of course, Tolstoy was not writing from personal experience because he was alive when he wrote it. It's a good book.
Yeah, it is. It's not a perfect little book. Not enough virtuous characters in it. Again, thanks for carrying it, Karl. You guys sapped. You took all the good out of me in that first show.
What was that first show?
Well, it was the Music and Ideas podcast, and we covered bluegrass.
Right. So the Music and Ideas, you'll have to dig for it, or you go to, where do we go on the website to find it?
You can go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and see this show and the other show.
And you should be able to put that link in whatever your podcatcher of choice is.
Yeah, there are subscribe buttons on those on that page. Yeah.
And tell your friends. So we're having fun doing the shows. We'd like more people to listen to them, and you could help us out.
Yeah, that would make it more funner. We just closed enrollment, and we had a number of listeners of this show join. So thank you. That's how we know that doing this is worth it. This is one of our advertising routes. It's like the Jack Benny program brought to you by Lucky Strikes. That's what this is like. It's an old advertising model. We're still doing it. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Like that. So if you guys continue to buy the product, then we know that the show is working, and we'll just keep on doing it. Because otherwise it's cramping my style. You know?
You don't like talking with me?
Yeah, I do, but we wouldn't have to have the cameras on, and I wouldn't have to watch my mouth as much. We could talk politics more.
Yeah, to save us from politics, keep listening to the show.
Right. Well, so to help support the show, go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and join the mailing list there. We'll send you, that's another way to get the shows. We have links to the shows in our newsletter and links to the playlists for the Music and Ideas show there in the newsletter. And we send you all kinds of things that would be helpful to you if you're a reader of the great books. And then eventually we'll send you a coupon code. So if you want to join us there at the main program, you can do it at a discount, because you guys are worth more to us at the lower price, because you're better people than people that just come in off the street. We buy Facebook ads, and we attract clients through Facebook ads, but the people that come through the podcast, they're better clients.
That's right. You're an elite group.
That's right. They already understand it. Next week, we're going to read The Facts Concerning the Recent Carnival of Crime in Connecticut by Mark Twain.
Which is a perfect little story.
Oh, good. I've not read this one.
It's pretty short.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. So send a link to this to one of your buddies and hit subscribe. You know, when you're at work and you're over in your friend's cubicle and they jump up to go get another cup of coffee or something, get on their computer and subscribe them. If your spouse puts their phone down, just open it and just subscribe them to the show. Let's quit suggesting. Let's start taking action. Subscribe them to the show, and then we'll get a show to them next week. Talk to you soon.